Hi there, welcome back in the workshop for an episode that for once has nothing to do with competition shooting and nothing to do with military firearms. This is a little trip down memory lane for me because I'm going to present to you this dainty little carbine. Je suis sûr que les Français parmi vous vont tout de suite la reconnaître, but for those for whom this might not be familiar, this is a unique X51Bis carbine. This is something of a cult item in France. People of my generation and let's say a decade either side will most probably have had one of these either as a youth shooter or as a loaner gun on a range or with their parents. Yeah, so very, very well known and very well appreciated. So this is made by Unique, as the name implies. Unique is not a manufacturer. It's the trade name of the Manufacture d'Armes des Pyrénées Françaises, MAPF, so the French Pyrenean arms manufacturer. And that was a private enterprise that was started by a Basque gentleman who hopped across the border from Spain to Hendaye, which is a border town right on the south-eastern Atlantic coast of France, just on the border with Spain, there in the Pyrenees. No big surprise, because not too far into the Basque homeland there is Eibar, which is of course, well, was at the time, we're talking 1920s, had a thriving arms industry. So I guess he took his expertise and hopped the border and set themselves up there. And Unique kept on running for up till 2001 in the family, so something quite remarkable. And basically they started off in the 20s basically copying the Spanish gun trade, working on versions of the early pocket pistols, the Colt automatics and Brownings and so on, pocket pistols. And they elaborated on the Ruby as well. I'll show you one of those another time, made by Unique as well. Very well used by the French police force. And then they of course expanded their range. They made sort of just civilian targets and plinking rifles, all the way up to Olympic target pistols. The Unique DES 69, for instance, is I think pretty well known even internationally. Very, very vintage now, but it proved its worth. So they were made inexpensive and good quality guns. So what's the pedigree on this particular rifle? Well, it started off just pre-war, 1939, and then obviously they had to abandon everything and concentrate on military contracts. And then they were occupied and provided firearms for the Wehrmacht. So this was put aside for a while. However, post-war they jumped back onto the project and they came out with something called the V49, which at first glance looks pretty much like one of these. There are a couple of differences. External, the mechanism inside is the same. They would have a black Bakelite front end here, and the sling swivel would be mounted directly on the barrel instead of here on the nose cap. There was just a post front sight, buckhorn sights, no scope rail, and the stock has a slightly different comb and a smaller pistol grip. Then they upgraded to the X51, which was basically just switching from the Bakelite to a wooden grip here. And then this, the X51Bis, is, by the way, Bis is just it's the French nomenclature for an improved version of something. So a bit like the star system in UK firearms. So yes, this was the luxury version. So for that they moved a sling swivel in here. They have a fully adjustable rear sight, scope rail, a nice ramp and shrouded front sight here. And yes, as I said, they changed the profile here a bit of the grips. And internally it stayed the same. So let's take a little closer look at the insides, well, the insides and the outsides. So what do we have? Let's start at the muzzle end. We have a threaded muzzle cap, so you can take this off and put a silencer on it. It is a silencer because it's called silencieux. And bead on top of the ramp, a nice shroud. Now the silencer was also provided by Unique. There were several models, one with a threaded connection, there was another one with a bayonet fitting, which was, I'm guessing, probably for the previous models. And then we have a charging plunger, which might give a clue as to how this thing works. And the rear sight, as I mentioned, is adjustable for windage and elevation. And it's graduated from 25 to 150 meters, so very reasonable for 22 LR. We've got a plethora of markings on both sides with commercial Saint-Étienne proofs. And the serial number on this one puts it at 1974. So good nick for that kind of vintage. And there's the scope rail. And it is all steel, by the way. All metal is steel, so despite it being quite short and handy and sort of thin, it comes out to just a touch over a metre, so 40 inches. It's got a reasonable weight to it. Then we got simple crossbolt safety. That's the magazine release. A little 5-rounder. 10-rounders were also available. You have to be careful when you go shopping for these magazines because they change the dimensions a bit during manufacture. So there are 2 dimensions, widths of magazine well. So you have to be careful and know what you're looking for, because unfortunately not all magazines fit all carbines. There we go. Now there's a nifty feature inside the trigger guard here. So here we can see there's just a trigger, and this shows that the hammer is cocked. So if I release it, now I'm going to dry fire this. I know I shouldn't, but in the name of YouTube. Oh yes, forgot to mention, there's a magazine safety too. Tick. There, you can see a little tab has suddenly poked out from inside there, and that means that the hammer has dropped. So if this isn't showing, maybe there's a round loaded with the hammer cocked. So then you need to press the plunger a bit just to make sure. So that's all on this side. This thumb screw is for disassembly, because this can be this is a takedown model. Well, they all take down, but we'll do that in a second. I'll show you something on the other side first. Here we've got a nice little knight with his shield with PYR and a little guarantee marking on the flag above him. So just showing Pyrenean quality there. So we have this funny screw with a sleeve on it. Now what this does is it allows you to switch from a conventional semi-automatic open bolt functioning, so it'll keep cycling and cocking the hammer as long as there's rounds in there. It doesn't lock open on empty, but if you unscrew this sleeve out of its seat here in the just in front of the magwell, what this allows you to do is to release a bolt stop, and that means that when you do cock it, the bolt stop rides up and locks the bolt back, and this allows you to operate in a sort of semi-manual mode. So whenever you want to fire, you just press down, fire, and recoil, lock open again, release, and so on and so forth. It's a little unusual and nifty feature. So I'll show you how that works later on the range. In the meantime, the standard mode of operation was just standard semi-automatic like that. So let's see how it works on the inside. Something that some of you will recognize. Oops. So disassembly is very easy. undo the captive thumb screw and pull the two sections apart, and there we go. And this may seem familiar to some of you, especially if you watched C and Arsenal's episode on the Winchester 1907, because this is basically a rimfire miniaturized version of that very mechanism. So we've got the bolt here with a huge long extension and the recoil spring there captive inside, and the plunger rod here just pushes on the front, and with the recoil this cycles backwards and forwards and cocks the hammer. The firing pin is inside, simple hook ejector, and a rimfire, vertical rimfire pin there. There's not much more to say really. Very, very simple system. You can even disassemble it easily from this point just by pulling out and away. Nothing much to say, and this is also captive, so that's also very nice and easy to clean and disassemble should you need to. There we go. So, I mean, to see that they've used a known system is quite typical of Unique. They quite often took, adapted and improved known firearm systems to their own ends. So it was quite a nice surprise to see. I didn't recognise it obviously back in the day, but since I've recently been going into vintage firearms, I was suddenly thought back and thought, hang on, this does look extremely familiar to me. So there. Right, let me reassemble this, and then I shall take you back a few months to when I actually shot it. So, let's put this together. Probably there should be some cheesy danger music and unnecessary clicky noises as I assemble this, as like in the action films. Ready to go. My tiny 5-round mag. Okay, so full semi-auto first. Brings back memories. Oop, idiot click. So I've now set it to manual semi-auto, I suppose. So I've wound out the collar around the bolt stop pusher, call it. That means it's free of its recess in the receiver, and that will allow the bolt stop to rise up once the bolt is fully back. I guess the advantage of this is particularly for beginners and teaching kids. It means that after every shot they have to do an action to release the next round, rather than just spraying, pulling the trigger as many times as fast as they can. Anyway, that's the idea, and just show you how it works. So you charge it as normal, and then there, bolt's caught back. So just push down, and we're ready. So, one shot's gone, bolt's been caught, release for the next one, and so on. there we go. Lovely little thing, which I shall keep forever. Now I suppose one question about this strange semi-manual thing would be perhaps for certain competitions, where would it be count as a manual when semi-auto are not allowed? It's an interesting hypothesis. I don't know. Back in the day, 70s, 80s. So there you go. As you can see, it runs smoothly in both modes of operation. Accuracy is perfectly fine for what it is. It's certainly not a target rifle. And yeah, trigger is a little bit gritty and creepy. I'll see whether I do something about it at some point. And I'll probably put a scope on it to relieve my tired eyes. And so there you go. I said it was a trip down memory lane. Now this is because this is actually the very first rifle or firearm that I ever shot at all. And I'd go out with my father and we'd go and shoot some cans in the forest, as you do. Another good one was throwing cans into a river and trying to sink them. First taste of dynamic shooting there. Anyway, he sadly passed away in February. So, you know, every chance I get to take this out and shoot, it brings back some happy memories. So, yes, now you know what they are. Now you can, if you spot one in a shop somewhere, you'll know what it is. I wouldn't say they're rare, but perhaps exotic, especially in the Anglo-Saxon world. Yeah, you can appreciate them. They're great little guns. So now what remains is for me to say thank you all for watching. Thank you for your patience. And thank you for all your support, whether it just be emotional support, financial support, those of you who contribute to Patreon. If you haven't, please consider doing so, because without it we simply can't continue doing what we're doing, or at least as frequently, to bring you good content all the time. And also don't forget to follow us on Instagram, because we are modern, honest. Well, we're trying our best anyway. Usually what gets posted to Instagram gets posted on Facebook, but I know some people are on one and not the other. So now you'll get at least some updates there too. Right, I'll stop blathering now, and I will see you again next time. Bye.